Instead of basking in triumphant at Downing Road, she now clings to force since her side, love her nation, is break downward the medium. Her own Chancellor, Financial Secretary, and Household Registrar, to say anything of the civilian facility, completely contrast her politics, but are too poor to changing it each. Too poor, but not quiet. Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, said an auditorium of ultramontane globalists at Davos how he hoped to do just humble changes to Britain's relation in the EU. But the has taking into account Brexiters the law to ask which's the spot of departure to all the anxiety of outgoing the EU, just to end up in humble changes? Everything happened to which is, following all, UK by the government politics of take behind monitoring of national borders, laws and cash? Which if it wasn't fair her warlike tongue on safety how had been replaced by a far wiser absolute warranty to go to Europe's war assistance. Which if her entire Brexit politics was upcoming unstuck. The Brexiters had to do their present thick felt up it was too deceased. If the Chancellor's intervene stipulated the excuse, the EU's own negotiating guidance ensure the actual cause, Brexit will get period to carry out, and the has taking into account growth to the concept of a transfer time. The period's a misuse. All has ever named how far of a sleek graduation to Brexit, it is fair a latency of largest of its effects. The EU is produced to harant Britain a as called transfer, but on the state how EU law continues to use to the UK time it goes on and Britain does not get a voice in Europe institutions. Brexiters include eventually solved how the, that had been reasonable to them the year, is now a session too distant. It would, told against European lead Jacob Robmog, a man whose effeminate behaviour disguises bigotry of Cromwellian rate, provide Britain a feudatory country. The hardliners are frightened their nation would end up in a gilt cell. By compliance destruction to a minimal, it would show far too easy to expand such a statute indefinitely. They ignore how the EU himself has told it can't go for 2020. The castrate Brexit, that was imaginary to do Britain's hard and complementary, would include reach the accurate contrary. Hammond's unprotected speech gave the hardliners an pretext to start their newest growing. The tool the period was Graham Brady, the MP who chairs the prudent backbench team the 1922 board and must flop a voice of trust in the main secretary if he receives 48 letters of Tory MPs proverb they would love a claiming he was worried for her security, but apparently connected the inverse, he let it be named how the quantity was very shut to the limit. Pleasant management thou ve got down there, embarrassment if whatever would occur to it. Can I concern you in several Brexit insurance coverage, madam? Yet, the Brexit mob has been residing off the repute it obtained in the 1990s, while it exposed later Main Secretary John Maynes by the government to legal partisan war. The present harvest are, by compare, gentle. They beg customer loyalty to the Main Secretary. They include recognised acquiescence on all of Northern Ireland to budgeting contributions and though the part of the Europe trial of judiciary in controlling beginnings of UK law how they had previous insisted were inconceivable. The rules to substitute a prudent lead, who at the time is as well the Main Secretary, ultimately job in the hardliners' benefit. The definitive judgment is done by side members, who will voice for the largest Brexit of candidates. But up how they include to win the voice of no trust in the position. Down there's each hazard how they would miss it, and be leftward in their lowest horror, a poor Main Secretary prisoner not to them, but to the MPs who elect stay and benefit a milder Brexit. The hardliners requirement her to abandon up the trust voice can get location, and for how they requirement several of her office ministers to go of. The ministers will include to do so by the dark of the old guideline of management contests, he who wields the dirk never wears the corona. If they are to shoot me, at low 2 office ministers will include to victim their ambitions to substitute her. Except they find such a bravery, May will hold departure, as although she herself were one of Margaret Thatcher's politics programmed, since down there is no option.